This morning, we are hearing more from the newly appointed Wilmington police chief who fired 3 veteran officers. Those officers are accused of using racist language while discussing protesters, and it was caught on one of the officers' in-car camera.
The teen calling the encounter with police.
And is an Army Second Lieutenant.
June 6, 2020, Wilmington, North Carolina. A routine audit of police vehicle cameras exposes a secret, horrifying reality. The casual conversation between 3 white Wilmington police officers explodes with violent racial slurs and chilling fantasies about killing black people. In cold, calculated tones, one officer outlines his desire to buy an assault rifle and begin a race war, yearning for the day he can wipe them off the blanking map. How could these men, sworn to uphold the law and protect all citizens, become so monstrously radicalized? The Wilmington incident is just the tip of the iceberg. It signals a deeply troubling issue: the presence of white nationalist ideologies within the very agencies meant to uphold the law. This isn't new. For decades, the FBI has warned of this threat, and it's not just about a few bad apples. There are so many more examples. Los Angeles, where a neo-Nazi sheriff's gang terrorized communities of color. Chicago, where a detective with ties to the Ku Klux Klan tortured over 100 black men for decades. Texas, where card-carrying Klansmen walked the beat. And Mississippi, where a police goon squad mercilessly tortured black men for no reason and tried to cover up their crimes. These aren't isolated incidents. They happen all across the U.S., in states like Alabama, California, Connecticut, Michigan, Virginia, and Oregon. The list goes on and on and on. This is a systemic infection. But let's be clear, we're not against the police. We stand for equality. We need great police in every corner of America who protect each person equally, without prejudice. We cannot turn a blind eye to these injustices any longer. It's time to confront this uncomfortable truth. How widespread is this problem, you might ask? How often has such bias led to abuse of power, or even death? Why aren't police departments doing a better job of weeding out these extremists in their ranks? And most importantly, how do we hold those who abuse their positions accountable? The answers aren't easy, but ignoring the problem is unthinkable. Join us as we delve into the disturbing reality of white power policing in America. The foundation of policing. We can't talk about why extremists find it so easy to remain in police departments across America without touching on the challenging history of policing itself, which had its origins in the slave patrols that ensured that the human property of enslaved people was returned to the plantations where they were held captive when they tried to escape. Slave patrols were bands of white men given the horrifying power to search homes, to question anyone with dark skin, and to punish them without mercy. They were judges, juries, and executioners, all in one, all for the plantation owners. It wasn't only on plantations, though. In American cities, slave patrols became the first police. Long before they had official badges and uniforms, they ruled the black community with fear and violence. And even after slavery ended, these same tactics were used to keep black people oppressed and controlled. When the Civil War ended, Southern states weren't ready to release their grip. After a few short years, black codes were passed, restricting where black people could live, work, and travel. Police played a crucial role in enforcing these unjust laws. Any black person found idle could be arrested and forced into unpaid convict labor. It was a way to restore the slave-era economy with a new supply of exploited black bodies. The Ku Klux Klan formed to keep the racial hierarchy that had been established before the Civil War. Their attacks targeted black businessmen, leaders, teachers, voters, and any white allies that stood with them. Night raids, whippings, arson, and cold-blooded murders became horrifyingly commonplace. And some masked Klansmen also wore police badges, making sure that their acts of domestic terrorism were protected by law. This use of policing and the systems of law by white supremacist groups to defend their vision of racial hierarchy isn't a new strategy. It was proven effective throughout our past and continues to be used to this day. The modern face of white power policing. But that was a long time ago, right? Surely things can't be like that today. Well, in 2006, the FBI released a bombshell report stating that members of white nationalist groups had been secretly joining police departments in large numbers across the country and have reached the highest levels. This report also proved that white supremacist groups in the United States see the police as a prime recruiting ground. The FBI even warned that police officers sympathetic to these groups might use their professional resources, like access to weapons, training, and sensitive information, against the very communities they're sworn to protect. Originally, the FBI tried to heavily redact and bury this report, hiding the truth from the American people. They scrubbed details of incidents where white supremacist officers abused their power, protected their fellow racists, and leaked intelligence, aiding in domestic terrorism. Eventually, the full report was released. And here's what it revealed: police officers joining the National Alliance, a notorious hate group, even rising to positions of leadership. Correctional officers, indoctrinated by Nazi gangs in prison, then bringing that poison to the streets. Even threats against black citizens and elected officials made by those meant to serve them. This report was buried, not for national security, but to protect reputations. The FBI didn't want the public to know how deep the rot was, or even still is. But the truth cannot, and should not, be silenced. White nationalists use their badge to rain terror on black and brown communities with near impunity. They see themselves as above the law, and they are almost always treated that way by our legal system. That's a recipe for abuse of power, for ignoring the cries of black and brown communities, and for outright violence. The unredacted FBI report confirms this, mentioning incidents where white supremacist officers went far beyond ignoring the law. They actively committed crimes without ever having to face justice. The modern white power movement is secretive in the way they make their way into police departments. They use code words, dog whistles, and hide their true beliefs to slip past vetting processes. Sometimes hiding isn't even necessary. We can see this in viral videos of police officers flashing white supremacist gang signs, proudly displaying racist tattoos, or openly harassing people of color, without anyone questioning their motives. Studies show this is a coordinated effort. White supremacist organizations actively recruit from military and law enforcement, seeking individuals trained in violence to further their hateful goals. The most notorious group was the National Alliance, whose tactics were written into fictionalized manuals that inspire white supremacist violence to this day. When fellow officers sympathize with white supremacist ideology, the entire system is poisoned, turning the very people meant to keep us safe into a deadly threat. But how can this happen in modern America? There are several reasons. Hate groups see the police as fertile ground. They target officers with shared ideologies, offering a sense of camaraderie and twisted validation for their beliefs. Sometimes police culture itself fosters an us versus them mentality that can be dangerously twisted toward racial prejudice. Departments often lack robust screening processes and background checks to identify individuals harboring these views. There are tests to see if people harbor bias that could be used to screen officers, and background checks of their social media profiles and affiliations would be the least that departments should do before hiring officers. After officers are in uniform, it's even tougher to screen them. Hate speech is protected by the First Amendment, making it hard to act without clear evidence of intent to harm. Police work already carries immense stress. This pressure, coupled with deeply ingrained racial disparities within the justice system, can make it harder for officers to consciously fight their own biases. The concept of police culture is complex and often shrouded in controversy. Many people view the police force as a symbol of protection and safety, while others see them as enforcers of systemic oppression. The truth lies somewhere in between, often depending on what neighborhood you live in. But one thing is certain. Within the world of law enforcement, there exists a shared set of ideologies that shape the behaviors and beliefs of officers. Unfortunately, this same culture can also foster an us versus them mentality that can be dangerously twisted toward racial prejudice, and this has bizarre consequences. The FBI report listed troubling cases: former police officers tied to the KKK threatening black children, a Nazi gang leader working inside a prison, radicalizing inmates, and these were just the examples that we are allowed to see. Today's threat is insidious and nearly invisible to those who choose not to see it. There are no more obvious hoods and robes. They wear polo shirts and even police badges. Online message boards buzz with extremists sharing police tactics and training, making them even more dangerous. And many of our communities unknowingly trust these individuals with their safety. Since 2000, white supremacist officers or those expressing extremist views have been exposed in over a dozen states. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Social media exposes many more, spewing racist, anti-immigrant, and sexist abuse. Now think about every traffic stop, every arrest. How can you be sure that all the officers you encounter are free from these biases? From slave patrols to Jim Crow, American law enforcement has a poisoned history with white supremacy. The battle for civil rights never fully erased those scars. And some of today's hate groups have direct links to the KKK and similar organizations. This isn't just history repeating itself. It's a deep-rooted evil that keeps evolving. But this is about more than just reports and statistics. This is real life. Or rather, the taking of real lives. We're going to delve into recent cases where white supremacist officers used their power to commit terrible acts of hate. True cases, when the badge protects the bias. Our first case is in Wilmington, North Carolina, where a routine audit in 2020 opened a Pandora's box of racist hatred within the very department meant to protect its citizens. The Wilmington Police Department, in a North Carolina coastal town, seemed like so many others. But underneath the surface, the legacy of Jim Crow lingered, and hatred festered. Officers Kevin Piner, Jesse Moore, and James Gilmore thought their vitriol was private, their plans of racist violence just dark fantasies, but their dashboard camera exposed the truth. On the audio, Piner said he is ready for a new civil war that he believes is coming, saying, "We are just gonna go out and start slaughtering them effing N-words. I can't wait. God, I can't wait." Piner said a civil war is needed to wipe him off the effing map. That'll put him back about 4 or 5 generations. He also said that he planned to buy an assault rifle in the next couple of weeks. Piner's voice echoes with genocidal glee, but the other officers just listened to all of this with tacit agreement. This clearly wasn't the first time these officers spoke to each other like that, in the chilling language of white supremacist terrorism. These men didn't just hate individuals, they hated an entire race of people. At first, the Wilmington Police Department fumbled, downplaying this terrible conversation as just venting their stress, an excuse so unbelievable, it only added insult to injury. When confronted, the officers tried to weasel out of responsibility for their actions, blaming Black Lives Matter, claiming twisted religious beliefs, anything. Thankfully, something was different in Wilmington than in so many other cities where this type of incident happened. Chief Donnie Williams, who happened to be African American, refused to cover it up. He said, "There is no place for this behavior in our agency or our city." His words, backed by the district attorney and outraged leaders, felt like a turning point. But was it really? Wilmington took the vital step of branding these officers Giglio impaired, ensuring they'd never wear a badge again. Yet, even in this victory, a chilling question echoes. How many more Piners, Moores, and Gilmores patrol our streets? Were they caught by a robust system? Or was this just dumb luck? The fight for police accountability shouldn't be a gamble. The Wilmington case proves change is possible, but it also highlights how rare it is. But let's be clear, the Wilmington officers, while shocking, were loud in their hatred. Often, white power policing operates in the shadows, lurking within systems that protect the abusers, and not the vulnerable. This was the case in Chicago, a city scarred by decades of police brutality, where one name became synonymous with racist terror: Detective Commander John Burge. Unlike Wilmington, Burge wasn't just a few racist officers, he was the system itself. For decades, his reign of terror targeted over 100 black men, extracting false confessions through brutality unimaginable to most. Electric shocks to the genitals, suffocation, beatings. His cruelty took countless forms. Burge had an entire squad of men who worked with him to perform this torture, and, according to the victims, it was clear that the officers enjoyed every minute of torturing them, with sadistic looks on their faces. Officers were described by their victims as enjoying the torture as if they were having an orgasm. They said that the Chicago police got plenty satisfaction out of torturing us. They loved to see us cry, hurt, and in pain. And this scandal goes far beyond the officers who were actively participating in the torture. This could not have continued for decades without the silence of colleagues, prosecutors, and the mayor, who all knew about what was going on. Chicago's Mayor Daley knew about the torture as early as February 1982, 10 years before the torture program ended, and did absolutely nothing. We can only assume why. In 1991, the city of Chicago finally admitted Burge's torture. By 1993, the Chicago Police Board voted to terminate Burge. But in that same year, Chicago's police union, the Fraternal Order of Police, made plans to honor Burge and 4 other officers involved in the torture group in Chicago's South Side Irish Parade after their torture program was made public. The float was canceled only after public protest. You can decide what this says about the Chicago Police Union for yourself. Since Burge was finally brought down, and let's be clear, he was convicted for lying about the torture, not for committing it. Chicago has paid millions to his victims, yet money can't resolve their deep trauma and the decades of life stolen from them. Daryl Cannon, a survivor of Burge's torture, explained what happened to him. 3 white detectives saying, "N-word, you're gonna tell me what I want to hear." And when I mumble the words "no," one of them would say, "Blow that N-word's head off." And they pulled the trigger of their shotgun. Men like Daryl Cannon, Reginald Henderson, Sean Tyler, and so many others, wrongly imprisoned for crimes they didn't commit, will never get back their youth, or their faith in a system that failed them so completely. Worse, Burge's downfall didn't bring true justice to Chicago. Many of his victims still remain behind bars, their pleas for innocence tangled in a system poisoned by his legacy. Maybe you're thinking, Burge's torture in Chicago was a long time ago. This can't be happening now. Let's look at the very recent case of white power policing in Mississippi. On January 24, 2023, 6 white former Rankin County Sheriff's deputies pled guilty to crimes that defy belief. They had a nickname for themselves, a badge of twisted pride: the Goon Squad. This Goon Squad attacked Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker, 2 black men, in their own home. There was no warrant, just raw, sadistic violence, beatings, tasering of the genitals, and even more vicious sexual assaults. Racial slurs spewed forth as freely as the blood they spilled. These weren't corrupt cops, they were terrorists using their badges as weapons. One deputy put a gun in Jenkins' mouth and fired, nearly killing him. Later, they planted a gun and other evidence, claiming self-defense to justify their brutality. This wasn't just defying the law, this was reveling in the power to do so. But in this case, we also found some semblance of justice. Jenkins and Parker, with the help of fearless civil rights lawyers, fought back in the legal system, and for the first time, these abusers are facing real consequences. All 6 officers received long prison sentences between 10 and 40 years as a result of their participation in this horrific torture. But make no mistake, this case isn't just about these 6 men. It's about Sheriff Brian Bailey, whose leadership allowed, perhaps even encouraged, this violence. Could Bailey himself be part of this white supremacist network? Other cases, like the suspicious death of Damian Cameron, hints that this evil runs deeper than anyone wants to admit. The Mississippi case shows us that this corruption continues to this day. These officers weren't hiding their white supremacy, they were screaming it. This is terrorism wearing a uniform, the darkest possible evolution of that legacy we traced all the way back to the slave patrols. How is what these officers are doing any different than what lynch mobs did 100 years ago? These harrowing stories are not as isolated as we'd like to think. Dozens of similar cases are unfolding across our nation at this moment, and those are just the ones we know about. During the Obama administration, the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division investigated 23 police departments across America and found massive civil rights violations in all but 6 of them. That equates to 73% of police departments that were found to have obvious civil rights abuses that called for action by the United States Justice Department. Unfortunately, all of these cases were dropped by the next administration, no matter how terrible the evidence against them was. Another example of how these acts are shielded by other parts of the government. Shannon Foley Martinez, a former member of a white supremacist group, confirms the FBI report. White supremacist groups have intentionally and successfully infiltrated police departments all over the country. What does this mean for America, especially black and brown communities? The impact on communities. Trust lies at the heart of good policing. People need to believe that officers are there to serve and protect them, regardless of skin color. White power policing shatters that trust, and the numbers don't lie. A recent Gallup poll revealed that only 19% of black Americans have confidence in the police, compared to 56% of white Americans. Knowing what we know now, does anyone wonder why? This mistrust has its roots in history. From slave patrols to Jim Crow-era terror, policing in America has often been a tool of racial control. Even after legal segregation ended, racist officers clung to those old ways. Every brutality case we see today echoes the past. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tyre Nichols. The names change, but the pattern remains. Racial profiling continues to be a modern reality. A Stanford University study found black drivers are 20% more likely to be stopped and nearly twice as likely to be searched, even though they are less likely to have contraband. How much of this race-based targeting is intentional and due to the white nationalists among the police? We can never truly know. We leave it up to our police officers to determine when a situation is dangerous and requires arrest, force, or sometimes death. If these life and death situations are seen through white nationalist opinions, it's easier to see how they can escalate beyond what is necessary, putting our citizens of color in danger. This all casts a long, dark shadow over the lives of millions of Americans. It destroys trust, poisons everyday interactions, and perpetuates a system of injustice that tears communities apart. Think about it. How would you feel if you knew the very people sworn to keep you safe might see you as the enemy just because of your skin color? This isn't some abstract fear. For many Americans, it's their daily reality. This fear warps the way people live. In neighborhoods targeted by white nationalist officers, there's a constant feeling of being under surveillance and under suspicion. Black and brown parents drill their children on how to survive encounters with the police, teaching fear before they even have a chance to understand authority. And sadly, this fear is justified. The psychological toll of this is immense. Imagine the stress of knowing every traffic stop, every interaction with the police could turn deadly, even if you've done nothing wrong. That anxiety grinds you down. It eats away at your feeling of safety, not just from criminals, but from those meant to protect you. It erodes mental health and creates trauma that lasts generations. But it's not just individuals who suffer. White power policing damages entire communities. When people lose faith in the system, they take matters into their own hands. Crimes go unreported. Cooperation with investigations dries up, and the innocent are left unprotected. This isn't about abstract concepts like trust. It's about more people getting hurt because they're afraid that the police will make their lives worse, not better. It gets worse. White power officers drive a vicious cycle of injustice. They target black and brown communities disproportionately for stops, searches, and arrests, even for minor offenses. This fills prisons with people of color, tearing families apart and creating a permanent underclass. When you're an ex-convict, finding a job or housing is nearly impossible, fueling desperation that sometimes leads back to crime, continuing the vicious cycle. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of oppression. It disenfranchises young people. When children grow up with negative views of the police, it breeds cynicism about all authority figures, teachers, politicians, even judges. This stunts their potential and undermines their aspirations. Why dream of making a difference in a world designed to keep you locked out? This robs us all of bright minds and potential leaders who could transform our society. Furthermore, white power policing erodes the moral authority of the entire force. When people see officers brutalize others with impunity, or worse, cover up for racist colleagues, it tarnishes the badge in the public eye. This makes it harder for the majority of good cops to do their jobs, eroding their credibility and the community's willingness to cooperate. This creates a dangerous us versus them mentality. When officers view certain communities as the enemy, they become more likely to use excessive force, regardless of an individual's actions. It also makes it easier for bad cops to escape accountability, with fellow officers circling the wagons to protect their own. Ultimately, white power policing threatens everyone's safety. A system built on racial bias cannot uphold true justice and cannot guarantee the protection of all its citizens. We need to realize that this isn't just about policing, it's about the moral fabric of our society. When white supremacy infects a system as powerful as law enforcement, it undermines everything we stand for: equality, justice, and the fundamental right to feel safe. This should outrage every American, regardless of race. We must change this. We need more police who are truly here to serve and protect all of us. Even if only 1% of police officers are involved in white nationalism, that's 1% too many, when society grants them a license to kill. But before we talk about solutions, we need to fully understand the damage done. Only then can we heal. One way of learning more about this important issue is by subscribing to Audible, using the link in the description below. There are so many incredible books on this subject that you can listen to whenever you have time, including Police Brutality and White Supremacy, The Fight Against American Traditions by Stan Thomas, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander, and To Protect and Serve, How to Fix America's Police by Norm Stamper, a former police officer. Knowledge is power, and subscribing to Audible using the link below allows you to support this channel and to empower yourself to help create a more equitable and just America. So, how do we start to change things? The difficulty of detection and removal. The damage runs deep. When the men and women entrusted with our safety become agents of oppression, the very promise of America falters. Changing this system won't be a simple task like hiring good cops, firing the bad ones, putting a few policies in place, and that's it. If only it were that easy. Changing an entrenched system is never simple, and when that system holds the power of life and death over citizens, the stakes demand we get it right. Let's be brutally honest. Powerful forces are invested in keeping things exactly as they are. Police unions wield incredible influence. Remember the Chicago case, where the police union still wanted to honor Burge after his torture ring was discovered? They have lawyers on retainer ready to bury even legitimate complaints in red tape. They manipulate public opinion, painting any attempt at reform as anti-police. Their priority, let's not kid ourselves, often seems more about preserving their own power than true public safety. Even well-meaning police officers can find themselves helpless in this climate. Many good cops desperately want a different way of policing, but the blue wall of silence is real. Speaking up about a racist colleague can make your work-life hell. Questioning a suspicious arrest might get threats whispered in your direction, or find you stuck with the worst shifts and the most dangerous assignments. Building a culture within policing where good cops feel empowered to hold bad ones accountable is essential, but it's a task that those on the outside demanding change can't directly achieve. That has to come from within. Then there's the sticky issue of the law itself. The First Amendment exists for a reason. We should all be wary of a government that can punish people just for their thoughts. But where's the line between a disgusting belief and an action that violates someone's rights, especially when the line between thoughts and actions is so thin and consequential for police officers and those they are sworn to protect? Proving that a traffic stop, a beating, or even a fatal shooting was racially motivated can be next to impossible, especially when officers instinctively close ranks to protect their own. We shouldn't abandon the principle of needing proof, but we do need much more objective and rigorous investigation processes, tougher consequences when bias is shown, and a legal system that takes this as the profound threat to justice that it is. One of the most insidious modern problems is that 21st century white supremacists have learned to hide in plain sight. The days of burning crosses on lawns are mostly gone. Now they use subtle code words, share coded memes, and inhabit extremist, often anonymous, chat rooms that most investigators don't even know exist. A standard background check might not catch any of that. That means some truly reprehensible people are regularly slipping through the cracks, undetected. We desperately need enhanced screening procedures. But we also need police culture to change. Officers who notice the warning signs of radicalization within their ranks must have protected channels to report it. And there needs to be real faith that those reports will lead to action, not the person making them being labeled a snitch. So, where do we go from here? This fight is complex. We need to tackle it from multiple angles simultaneously. Policy reform is the obvious place to start. Ending racial profiling is a moral imperative, and smart policing too. Focusing police resources on serious crime, not petty harassment, is a win for everyone. Body cameras, while imperfect, have proven effective at both deterring misconduct and providing vital evidence when it does occur. Making those records easily accessible to the public is crucial. No system should be allowed to police itself with complete secrecy. Building a culture of accountability is harder, but vital. Bad cops need to know that protecting a racist in their midst ultimately destroys themselves as well as their victims. We can't have cops who lie on reports, tamper with evidence, or brutally assault civilians and then suffer nothing more than a slap on the wrist, moving on to terrorize another day. When officers who commit serious offenses not only lose their jobs, but are stripped of their qualifications permanently, it sends a powerful message. Rethinking how we recruit and vet police officers is essential. Do our background checks adequately probe for potential bias? Are we scrutinizing social media for troubling online activity that might be missed by a standard search? And it's not just about who we let in. It's about what happens afterwards. Ongoing anti-bias training, community outreach initiatives, and mental health support for officers can all help combat the toxic mindset that allows extremism to fester. Community policing strategies, while often underfunded, consistently deliver results. Officers who walk a beat instead of just cruising in a car get to know the people they serve. They learn who the habitual troublemakers are without labeling an entire neighborhood as criminals. Kids who grow up knowing their local police officers as people, not a uniform, are less likely to turn on the police as a whole. This erodes the us versus them mentality on both sides, making communities safer for everyone. If we truly believe in equality under the law, if we want every person to feel safe regardless of their skin color, then the struggle against white power policing has to be taken very seriously. This battle is for the very soul of America, and you can bet those who profit from the current system know this all too well. They'll twist the message, claiming that wanting better, safer, fairer policing is the same as wanting no policing at all. They'll stoke fear and try to divide us along lines of race and class, but their desperation is a sign we're on the right track. This is where those of us who are not directly targeted by white power police have a vital role to play. We can't just sigh in frustration and look away because we feel safe enough to ignore the problem. We need to amplify the voices of victims, educate ourselves about these issues, and refuse to fall for the lies that will inevitably be hurled at reformers. Contact your elected officials at the local, state, and federal levels, and make it clear that fixing this horrific problem is a priority for you. Change will be hard, it will be slow, there will be setbacks, and those who benefit from the current system will push back with everything they've got. But we have no choice, because if we don't change this, it will change us, and not for the better. So now you know, what do we do? Share this video with everyone you know. No American should want this situation to continue. People all over the United States, and all over the world, need to know this is happening, so we can help be part of the solution. Send the FBI report at the link below to your local government officials, and demand that they investigate their police departments for white supremacists, and institute bias testing and training for their officers. We can't all have the equal protection under the law that is guaranteed by the Constitution if we have card-carrying white supremacists in our police forces. If you're a police officer, or no one, please do whatever you can to be part of the solution. We know that most officers have good intentions and want to uphold the law, treating everyone equally. But as long as they allow white nationalists in their ranks, they are putting innocent people's lives and freedom at stake. We need the majority of great officers on the force to speak out and speak up. Learn more about this issue and help support this channel by subscribing to Audible at the link below. Like this video and subscribe to this channel to stay informed about this topic and so many more true conspiracy stories that you need to know. Thank you for your interest and concern with this very important topic. America can never achieve its true mission and vision if we allow white nationalists to operate freely on our police forces. Let's keep moving our country forward, together.